All right, guys, I've had a ton of requests to cover performing rights organizations, all right? These music licensing agencies, BMI, ASCAP, who they are, what they do, what their role is in the music community. So today we're going to take a deep dive on just what they are, what they represent, and how they function in the music community for venues and musicians, all right? So let's dive in, and we're going to start with finding out just who they are. All right, there's tons of music rights organizations in the world. In the United States, we have three main ones, okay? It's BMI, ASCAP, and SESAC. We're going to break down each of those right now. Let's start with BMI. BMI is Broadcast Music Incorporated, okay? They're a for-profit organization. This is kind of important. You'll find out why later on. BMI represents more than 1.4 million songwriters, composers, and publishers with over 22.4 million musical works. They have offices in Atlanta, Austin, London, New York, Nashville, and Los Angeles. You're going to see a common theme here as we break down the other ones. They're the largest performing rights organization, founded in 1939. I think that has a large part to do with the fact that they are for-profit. And when things are for-profit, they tend to grow a lot faster than non-profit organizations. They currently represent artists such as Miley Cyrus, Eminem, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Patti LaBelle, and a million more. Literally 1,300,000 more or so. So, all right, that's BMI. Let's talk about ASCAP. ASCAP is the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. ASCAP is a non-profit organization. Most of their money gets paid back to the artists. ASCAP is a membership association of more than 1 million songwriters, composers, and music publishers, and they have licenses for over 20 million creative works. They have offices in New York, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Nashville, Puerto Rico, Miami, London, everywhere. And a lot of these performing rights organizations will be in all of those cities. Those are the main music hubs in the United States and, overseas as well. They're in London. They represent Chris Stapleton, Billie Eilish, Lainey Wilson, Beyoncé, and a bunch of other people. And those are probably the most two common ones that you're going to hear about, BMI and ASCAP. But everybody seems to forget about SESAC, and SESAC is a monster of its own. But comparatively, it's much, much smaller than these two. So let's dive into SESAC. All right, SESAC is the Society of European Stage Authors and Composers. SESAC is a for-profit, and unlike BMI and ASCAP, it is invitation only. You have to be invited to be an artist represented by SESAC. You can't just submit like BMI or ASCAP. You can submit to them through their website, through a portal, to have your music or your whatever your creative work is licensed by them. SESAC doesn't play that game. They send you an invitation, and otherwise you're not welcome. They currently hold a license for public performance of more than 1.5 million songs, and they only have about 15,000 affiliated songwriters, composers, and music publishers. They also have offices in New York, Nashville, Los Angeles, London, and Munich. I didn't know Munich was a music hub, but it is apparently. SESAC was founded in 1931 here in the United States, so they were the second one. And they represent artists such as Bob Dylan, Neil Diamond, Rush, Adele, Jack Harlow, Ariana Grande, Zac Brown, a bunch of those. So even though they're only 15,000, I mean, they have some heavy hitters in there. So that's the three in the United States. And now that we know who they are, let's talk about what they do. All right, quick synopsis of the performing rights organizations and what their role is. They exist to make sure musicians, songwriters, and composers get paid when their music is played in public. Let's break that down a little bit more. They help creators protect their work. When a songwriter or composer creates a song, they own the rights to it. That's how it always has been. If you paint a painting, you own the rights to that painting. If you make something, whatever your creative work is, you own it the second you create it. As long as you don't have a bunch of other hands in the pot, like if somebody else is using a brush, they probably co-own it with you. These performing rights organizations help those creators by managing the licensing of their music, so they don't have to manage it themselves. They don't have to track you down and be like, hey, you guys played my song at your bar last week and I would like compensated for it. So the performing rights organization is an intermediary that just kind of facilitates them getting paid for their work. And for the sake of the rest of this video, I'm just going to call performing rights organizations PROs. It's just less to say. PROs monitor music use as well. That's another one of their tools that they use. They keep track of where music is played. So that includes like live performances, radio, TV, streaming services like Spotify or YouTube, and even background music in places like restaurants and gyms and retail stores. So they keep a constant catalog of where music is being played, so then they know what music is being played there. They also issue licenses and collect those fees from licenses. So businesses or organizations that want to use music in any facet, they have to buy a license from the performing rights organization or PRO. They have to buy a license from that PRO that represents the artist that they want to play. That license gives them legal permission to play the music publicly. The fees from those licenses are pulled together by the PRO, and then once they collect those fees, they divide the money and send payments called royalties to the music creators based on how often and where those songs were played. So in essence, PROs act as a bridge kind of between music creators and the businesses or platforms that use their music. That system ensures creators get the income that they deserve while making it easy for businesses to legally use music. If you think of prior to Napster days, right, when you used to have to buy Napster, now I'm dating myself. Prior to like Napster and LimeWire, you used to have to buy a CD or buy a vinyl or buy a cassette. And then, you know, whenever they started making cassette recorders and those types of things, you were able to kind of, if you could get it on the radio and you could set your little microphone up by your speaker and you could record songs off the radio. That was kind of the first early versions of copyright infringement. Some of the first ones, at least that I know of, because I was guilty of that. And then Napster came around and everybody got it in their mind that music is free. That, it's basically included once you have your monthly subscription. If you have a bar or restaurant, you're like, I can just play this for everybody. And that's not quite the way that it works, especially with copyrights and that kind of copyright law in the United States. So one of the reasons for having these music licenses nowadays is just to make sure that these artists are being compensated in any way that their work is recreated. All right, so now that we know what PROs are, let's talk about how they help musicians, okay? All right, let's break it down. So number one way that PROs help artists is an income source, okay? They help artists earn money from their work. So anytime a song's played on the radio, streamed online, performed live, the artist gets paid royalties through their PRO. That can be a steady income for artists, even if they're not actively performing. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into just what that means for individual artists that aren't well known a little bit later. But for right now, just know that they collect that money and they give it to the artists that are represented by their PRO. All right, another way that they benefit the artists is with time and effort that they don't have to invest in chasing down money for the royalties when places use their music. These PROs, they chase down those venues and collect the money from them. They monitor all of those different sources to make sure that those artists are getting the money, so the artist just has more time to create, which I think is an awesome thing. All right, another way that they help is protection of the rights of that artist. Like the artists don't have to worry as much about these different venues or different platforms using their music for free because the PRO has a heck of a legal team. So they make sure that anyone playing that music has paid for the appropriate licenses. And if they haven't, they have legal action that they can go after them. So that's another way that they benefit artists. Many PROs also have partnerships with worldwide organizations. So that means that artists can get paid for their music even when it's played in another country, which is huge. Because if you're, a European songwriter and you're not getting a lot of traction in the UK or overseas, but your music is played a lot in the United States, it's good to have those relationships to be able to still collect some money and for your creation, for your time, for your writing of that song. And having those worldwide connections is one of the big benefits of a PRO. And PROs also represent artists of all sizes, right? From big name stars to independent creators. And so even if they're not famous per se, they can still be compensated for their time. So just in closing, for artists, PROs are like a support team. Okay, they make sure that the artist's music generates income and that their rights are respected, so they can focus on their craft without having to worry about legal or financial hassles. So without performing rights organizations, most artists would not get paid for their work. It's just that simple. In today's day and age where you're not buying a physical medium for anything, you're just kind of streaming, or you're listening to music in the background, or you're listening to it in your car on a Spotify subscription. Your subscription of $6.99 a month or whatever is not paying royalties on all those songwriters. I mean, it might be, but most songwriters aren't getting anything. Most musicians aren't getting anything out of that. Mostly just Spotify shareholders. So just keep that in mind. So that's exactly what they do for artists. Now let's talk about what they do for venues. And when it comes to venues, PROs, they allow, think of PROs as copyright attorneys, okay? And that's exactly what they are. So they're coming in and they're telling those venues, hey, you want to use these copyrighted works in your restaurant, in your brewery, in your whatever, in your live music venue to attract customers. And maybe not even, that might not be the primary use, but it's going to enhance the customer experience. It's going to keep people around. It's going to elevate the atmosphere that you have going on at your venue. So, they issue licenses, and those licenses can be anywhere from a couple $100 a year to tens of thousands of dollars a year, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, depending on the size of the venue, depending on if you charge a cover charge, depending on how many days of the week you have music. There's so many factors that I would have to do an entire another podcast on how they come up with this, but we'll break down a little bit of what they do for businesses here. And the first thing is something I just mentioned. They have to have a license to play copyrighted music. So they provide these PROs provide the license, and they kind of make sure that the business or the venue or whatever it is can legally play music without violating copyright laws. So that protects them from lawsuits or fines, unless they're getting fined by the PRO for not having the license. So that's number one. Number two that they provide to venues is access to a vast music library. So the big thing to remember for venues is that when you purchase a license from a PRO, like BMI or ASCAP or SESAC, you get access to all of the music that's in their library. So that means that you have access then to tens of that, to millions. If you figure on BMI and ASCAP alone, that's 40 million. That's 40 million songs or creative works that you would have access to. So you get this gigantic library to play from, and you're paying a yearly fee to one person rather than paying one to 40 million people if you were able to play 40 million songs back to back, which I don't think you can. But that's another thing that they give you, is this access to this gigantic library of music. So that's pretty much all that they do to help a business. Let's put it that way, all they offer to a business. Now let's talk about how they really affect a business. And one of the major ways that they affect a business is by charging them a licensing fee for hosting live music or playing music off of a radio or however they have this music into the restaurant. And, it's just part of a cost of doing business as a live music venue. But most of the time, those fees are based on the size of the venue, how often the music is used, the way it's played, if it's live or recorded or streaming. A million factors go into it. And a little helpful tip to venue owners out there, you can negotiate with most of these PROs. If they come in with a number that's outrageous, I think you should negotiate anytime, by the way. If you can get a little bit cheaper, I don't think that you're saving $1,000 or something a year is going to take food out of the mouths of other people. But I would encourage you to negotiate. Most of the time, they will give you a reduced rate if it's all you can afford. And you just, it's on you, because they're never going to offer you a lower rate without you trying to negotiate. So just try that and maybe help keep down the cost of doing business a little bit. Another way that they can affect local businesses or music venues or restaurants and breweries and that type of thing is by these spot checks that they do. They'll stop out, they'll come in plain clothes, they don't identify who they are, they'll sit in the restaurant and they'll listen for music that's represented by their performing rights organization. And if they hear it, they'll note down the times, they'll note down the location, they'll note down everything, and then they will send you a letter in the mail. And we're going to dive into that in just a second. If you're not compliant with a PRO, we're going to dive into just exactly how far they go. But that's something that they do on a regular basis. And I know of a ton of cases here just in central Pennsylvania in the last 6 months that have happened. So they are out there. But just to wrap things up and put a bow on it, when it comes to PROs for businesses, they make it easier for venues and businesses to use music legally, right? And have this access to this gigantic catalog of songs. And while there's a cost involved, it's more of an investment in providing a better atmosphere for customers and ensuring compliance with those copyright laws. All right, let's get into what happens if you do not pay them. So the first thing that they're going to do if they find out that you're having music without a license is send you a letter. It's either a warning or a demand letter, depending on how it's worded. That letter is going to outline your need to obtain a license and comply with copyright laws. So that's the first thing they're going to do. It's like a warning shot. They'll go, hey, you guys are having music. You either need to stop having music or you need to have a license because you are in direct violation of copyright laws. The second thing they're going to possibly do is take legal action. Okay, so if you ignore the warning or you continue to use music without a license, the PROs may file a lawsuit for copyright infringement. The penalty for infringement, by the way, can include fines, court costs, legal fees. Those costs can range from a few $1,000s to tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the extent of the infringement. Now, you have to remember that this is going to be a case-by-case basis, but every single time you get sued by them, it's going to be more than it would have been to just pay the license. I mean, it's a punishment, right? So if you don't know, I'm a solo musician and I play a ton of venues in the area, and I know of a lot of venues who did it for a while without a license and then got one of those letters, ignored it, got a legal action, didn't show up to court, and then they were put out of business. It's that simple. Number 3 of the things that happen when you don't comply is you can end up with some reputational damage for your venue. Being sued for copyright infringement doesn't look great. It doesn't look great on Facebook. It doesn't look great in the papers. It doesn't look great to an outside perspective that you were trying to get away with, not complying with the law that all of the venues around you were possibly complying with, or that, hundreds or thousands of venues in your state comply with, that you just thought it didn't apply to you. So that's a reputational problem, especially if your case garners, gets some public attention. Artists and performers also may be hesitant to work with a venue that is known for kind of not respecting those intellectual creative arts. So that's another thing you could face if you decide to not purchase the license outside of monetary damages. Another thing you can face if you do not comply is business disruption. If a venue has a lawsuit that they're trying to fight and everything else, it might be ordered to stop using music completely until the proper licenses are obtained. That could disrupt events or impact your customer experiences and lead to a loss of business. Just because, who wants to dine in a completely silent restaurant? Who wants to go out to a bar that has no music on a Friday or Saturday night because they're being watched like a hawk by a PRO because there's a pending lawsuit. There's just no upside to not paying, in my opinion. Because you'll have personal liability too. So if you lose in court, which you will, they have like a 95% win rate. So if you lose in court to one of these PROs, you will have to pay them all those legal fees, right? All the legal fees. And then after that, you're also going to have to pay them for a license to have music after that. And they may not even issue it, number one. Number two, they may do really, really hard checks on you to just make sure you're in compliance from there on out. It's that simple. If you decided after that lawsuit, I'm not giving them another penny because I already paid them $50,000 in damages, well, guess what? You have to if you want to have live music. So that is the summary of what they are, what they do when it comes to businesses, what they do when it comes to musicians, so you have a little bit better of an understanding. Now I'm going to give you my personal opinion of PROs. So I personally know a bunch of musicians that are represented by BMI or ASCAP, or I don't think I know anybody in SESAC, that inner circle of SESAC. I don't know a single musician that generates enough income from their royalties from BMI or ASCAP to even pay for lunch, or let alone make a living off of it. Like, I don't know anybody who makes any substantial amount of money through their royalties from PROs. The disbursement of royalties among those performing rights organizations is like this complex process that involves calculations to determine what each artist's individual share is of the money that's collected. If your song's played on TV at night and not during prime time, it's not worth as much. If it's streamed on a YouTube channel or featured on a podcast, those two things completely correspond to different levels of compensation. The majority of revenue, though, stays at the top 1% of artists in each organization, which I think is a little crazy. But after doing this deep dive, I think the real way that PROs benefit the music community is through their compensation to the songwriters, right? And the composers, the people behind the music, the people that don't get fees for TV appearances or performing at the Super Bowl, right? They won't be signing autographs or releasing clothing brands. In an age where songs are streamed for a fee through apps for like personal use only, and no one's purchasing CDs or physical mediums, songwriters and composers need to have someone collecting money for them when their works are played or recreated. In my opinion, the songwriters from some of our favorite songs are the real winners in this whole music licensing game. When it comes to venues, my opinion of venues and their role in this whole thing really shifted when I started doing a ton of research on this topic. And, before I thought it was just like this gigantic money grab from like greedy corporations that are just trying to kill the live music scene, right? I thought it was rich people just trying to get richer on the backs of small businesses. I figured, like, why does Chris Stapleton need to get royalties every time some guy horribly covers his song in like the corner of some dive bar? I didn't think it really mattered that much. And I think the fees can be a gigantic deciding factor when it comes to venues hosting live music when live music isn't the product they're selling. So not a live music venue, right? I'm talking about restaurants. I'm talking about breweries. I'm talking about wineries. I'm talking about everybody who's selling something other than music to the people that come to their place. You know, it can be really rough to find out that you have to pay, $1,000 a year or something just to have some background music playing. And then if you want to have live music, it's more. And if you want to charge a cover charge, it's more. So those kind of things can be a real deciding factor. And I referenced it earlier in the podcast, but just in the past 2 months, there's been 9 venues in my area here in central Pennsylvania that have stopped having live music altogether. They just can't justify that increase in cost unless they see an increase in attendance. Like, it's an investment for them, right? So they have to have some kind of tangible increase in profit for them to justify because they're not selling music. So it's just an auxiliary thing trying to bring in more business, right? So they have to generate income off of that to justify it. And I mean, to the venues that decided to not have live music anymore, I can't blame them for making that business decision. And I feel for them. I feel for them for not seeing the value in having live music beyond the amount of money that it costs. What I will say, though, is as a musician, right, I constantly preach about the importance of supporting live music. I literally have stickers at my shows that say support live music. But supporting live music to me means more than just giving artists a place to play. Supporting live music means treating artists and performers and composers with respect for their role in the creation process. It means showing up to a concert when there's a 100% chance of rain because you want to see the music and you don't want the band to be alone. It means driving 3 hours, 4 hours to see your favorite act because you know they're not going to come to your small town. It means putting music and performance before profit. You know, I've driven to South Carolina to perform for $150. One show. It was a 16-hour round trip. I probably lost over $1,000 just in fees for driving and tolls and lodging and food. I would do it again. I've played for free at open mics, festivals, backyard parties. I've played to completely empty rooms and to absolutely hostile people. Those things are just the cost of doing business as a musician. I don't get to experience the highs of this crazy career that we have without the lows. But I do it because I have a dream of contributing to and being a part of the local music scene. So it's not about the money for me. It's never been about the money. If it was, I would have given up a long time ago. I think if you're a venue that really wants to support live music, paying a performing rights organization should just be another part of doing business. You're paying them so you can have some version of Chris Stapleton performing at your bar. You're paying them so patrons can enjoy some background music at your restaurant. You're paying them to keep music alive because without songwriters being compensated appropriately, we're just going to end up with AI-generated songs, and there's nothing creative about that. And if you're a venue and you want to support live music, but you can't figure out a way to justify paying a PRO for that license that you have to have, that they will come after you for if you do not have. If you're a venue that's on the fence about that, I would love to know why. If it's a cost thing, if it's, it's too expensive, we don't bring in enough revenue. I would love to know if you're doing the things to advertise the music as a product that you're selling. So are you posting enough? Are you telling people enough about live music? Is it just not working there? Because that is the case sometimes. Sometimes live music just doesn't work in a venue. And you should go to something else. Maybe a DJ. Maybe you try out a DJ, but you're still going to have to pay a PRO. So it boils down to, if you want to have live entertainment, finding a way to justify that cost is way more business-minded than just giving up on hosting live music because you don't think you should have to pay another fee. Because that fee puts food in the mouths of songwriters, artists, and creatives, and the world would be a lot more boring if there were none of those. So, all right. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, or whatever, drop it in the comments. Thank you for hanging out today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'm going to do a bunch more deep dives this year on a million different things. So thank you for being here, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you for tuning in today. Your support keeps the music flowing. Every note and what I play means the world just to hear you know it. We'll see you next time. Don't stray by. Your love is our